gonna throw. One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete! No flags! Head on back up the mountain! Carolina wins it in double overtime! Loftus, out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete! Incomplete! The bell belongs to us! Carolina wins it! 47-45 in double overtime!
Bernard fields it at the 26, heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Vlog podcast coming at you live on a Wednesday night here midweek as Carolina continues to roll through preseason camp. But we have to talk recruiting as Carolina with two big flips in the 2026 class, at least completed two big flips in the 2026 class. And then we have a commitment in the 2027 class for the Tar Heels. This one a big one, an in-state commitment for the team that I think could pay dividends for a while moving down into the future. So we'll talk about both of all three of those guys. And then we do have an interview with Trashawn Ruffin where he's talking about his decision to commit to Carolina, him being one of the top recruiters for Carolina as a committed prospect and all kinds of stuff. You know, make sure you stick around for that. But as I mentioned, you know, the two flips that Carolina made, it was Viliami Moala. He makes the flip from Oregon to Carolina official. That was one that was a long time in the making here, really about a month in the making for Carolina. And then you get Carson Snead to flip from Tennessee to Carolina. And so two huge commitments for the Tar Heels. That now has their class sitting at 35 commitments to this point. So they are in a really good spot. And, you know, let's start with, you know, the guy that's the biggest headliner out of this group, Zack, and that would be Carson Snead, the four-star tight end out of the state of Tennessee. Carolina goes into Nashville, pulls out that flip. One that, you know, many may have sort of expected with what we saw in terms of his brother committing to Carolina out of the transfer portal. But this was a nice addition for Carolina all around in this class. They do have other tight end commits, but not one nearly as talented as Carson Snead.
Yeah, absolutely. Great pickup for North Carolina, and one that was, despite the commitments that they have at the position, somewhat of a luxury pick, a guy that they felt was too good to pass up as it relates to Carson and, you know, where he fits in this class. Like you mentioned, just some background for him, was committed to Tennessee. That's where his brother committed and played, I believe, for a year or two the past few seasons before transferring to North Carolina ahead of the 2025 season. So I think there was times back in the spring that you know, people that follow recruiting looked and said, you know, is there any sort of connection there? What is this going to turn into, if anything? And, you know, at the time, it was always something to keep an eye on, but the feeling was, hey, you know, Tennessee's an SEC program. They've got a pretty robust, you know, NIL operation. They should be able to keep him if they want him. But North Carolina stayed in communication, you know, kept chipping here and eventually got the flip, which I think is a very big win for them. In terms of, what Carson brings as a player, like you mentioned, they do have some other guys here in the class, like Aiden Woods. They have Cooper McCutcheon, Avion Williams, and some of those guys have some positional versatility. So it's not a situation where you're locked in that you have to have all these guys in this room. But Carson Snead feels like a guy that's probably going to be solely tight end at the next level. Really right now a receiving threat, but a big bodied guy, a guy that is comfortable, going on the outside, is very, very comfortable, playing the ball on vertical routes, and has good speed, sort of, moving towards the end zone in that regard. I think moves decently well, sort of horizontally, or it has a little bit of shiftiness, not a ton, but, enough for what you want to see at the tight end position. And, feels like that's something that he is willing to do, which I think is a big deal. Didn't see a ton of him as a blocker, which is not uncommon for a lot of these guys coming out of one job or the other in their high school team. So they are primarily receivers or primarily blockers. He's primarily a receiver at the high school level right now. So that will be something to sort of see or speculate on as he moves into the college ranks. But just from watching the film, from watching the highlights, you see his overall athletic profile that really stands out. He looks like a guy that can, really be a receiving mismatch, which is one of those things that throughout not only college football, but the NFL, we've seen be a big point of emphasis for teams, is having that sort of, receiving tight end that can be a mismatch against linebackers, safeties, can be a really, solid option over the middle. And it feels like Carson fits that role. So overall, really, really good pickup for North Carolina, and one that I think that, fans that follow this have been looking for a while and finally get to see come to fruition here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most talented tight end that they've had since Bryson Nesbitt committed to them. And I think that is true. You look back in 13 games this past year, 33 catches, 409 yards, 6 touchdowns, also collected 44 tackles, total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 3 sacks and an interception on defense. As a sophomore, numbers were a little bit different. Just 15 catches for 297 yards, but had 10 touchdowns. So 2/3 of the catches that he had as a sophomore turned into touchdowns. He also did play a little left tackle back in his sophomore year because they were so depleted at the left tackle position. So I gotta, that's the thing. To me, I think you give him a lot of credit for what he did as a sophomore. That probably leads you to believe that he knows how to block, that it's a capability of his, that even, if you don't see it a lot on his film this year, if you line him up as an inline tight end, that he's going to be able to have success there. I think this is one of those guys. I mean, 6'6", 248. Now, the height has not been, fully tested just yet. But the belief is that he is at least 6'5". And, at that size, that's amazing size that he brings to the table. And then with the athleticism that he has at that size, I think Carolina's getting a really good one here. A guy that doesn't get many 50-50 balls thrown his way, but when he does, really does a great job of going up to get the football, does a good job of high pointing it. Prior to the catch, really pretty good at freeing himself up. Pretty shifty route runner. Definitely shows that more in his junior film than he did in his sophomore film. And it also translates after the catch. I mean, there is a little bit of shiftiness to him that allows him to get free and create some big plays. So I think this is a guy that, has proved he can stretch the field as well. And with all that, I mean, you're talking about one of the more valuable pieces that Carolina has in this class, because we look at the tight end spot this year. We talked about it when we broke down the tight ends, just a couple of days ago here on the podcast for this year. You've got Jake Johnson that, I guess is a known quantity, but even him, he did not produce last year, just 2 catches for 21 yards. The rest of this group is really an unknown. We have no clue. Guys that did not produce at prior stops, or if you're a guy like Jordan Owens, you just didn't really produce a whole lot, even though you played a whole lot at the FCS level. So there could be some opportunities here early for a guy like Carson Snead at Carolina. And you look at some of the other guys that they brought in. McCutcheon, definitely a pass receiving threat. I think Avian Williams is a guy that can do that as well. You saw, a little bit of athleticism on his film despite his measurables, which would tell you that he would probably be more of a blocker. Aiden Woods, I think they're bringing him here basically as an H-back. At that size, you're looking for him to be an extra offensive lineman for you, and he really wasn't a guy that caught the football a lot at the high school level this past year. We'll see if that translates this year, and maybe he's a guy that is losing weight and trying to become more of a receiving threat. But Carolina's looking to build this room the way that Bill Belichick wants. They want to build this where, maybe there is an H-back in that room that can help you run the football, but then there's also a guy that can be sort of what Rob Gronkowski used to be for the Patriots, or I hate to bring the name up, but, he was successful at the NFL level. A guy like Aaron Hernandez, who, was a little bit thinner, wasn't necessarily the best blocking tight end, but had a lot of success as a receiver. I think that could be the way that Carolina is looking to build that tight end room. All right, let's move on to Viliami Moala, because he ends up committing to Carolina over Oklahoma, who was another team that was trying to make a late charge. And of course, he did flip from Oregon. He backed off of his commitment back in July. Carolina then lands him early in August. So what did you make of this commitment for Carolina? I think this one, a much bigger commitment for Carolina in terms of need, maybe not talent-wise, but definitely fills a need that I think was still there for Carolina in this 2026 class.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is an enormous pickup for North Carolina on multiple levels. I think the main one, just to mention there, is literally he's a big guy. And that's something that, line of scrimmage has been a big point of emphasis in the recruiting class, in the transfer portal, just for this roster overall for 2025 and beyond. They want to upgrade the line of scrimmage. They want to get that at the position that this roster feels comfortable with, or that this staff feels comfortable with. So I think that that's a big point of emphasis here, as we've discussed numerous times. And, I think that sort of interior defensive lineman is something that they've been looking for in this class. I mean, they have really, 6 to 7 guys that we feel like could play in sort of that 4-down defensive line, but not really a ton of guys on the interior. Really the only one to speak of thus far that we feel pretty firmly of, he could be a 3-tech or, a nose guard in this scheme would be Trashawn Ruffin. And I mean, that's one of your highest rated guys in the class, but that's just one guy. And similar to the tight end possession, it feels like interior defensive line on this current team for 2025 is a position that we don't have a lot of info about as to what are the proven commodities, what are guys that are going to, be locked into the 2 deep this year or into the future. So I think getting talent, continuing to upgrade that position was a huge, absolutely huge priority. And I think that Moala as an addition there is a really good pickup. This is a guy, like you mentioned, that was committed to Oregon. I believe it even moved to Eugene, has sort of played at a number of high schools, but for what we can see, played his junior year in Bingham High School in South Jordan, Utah, plays in 6A, the highest classification in the state. So, not your Texas or Florida or Georgia, but still a pretty good state for football, played at the highest level there and was very productive with what he did. Had 99 total tackles, 22 tackles for loss, 12.5 sacks from that interior defensive line position, and has continued to gain weight to sort of play that interior. You're listed now, depending on where you look, right around that 330 to 340 range. So that's sort of what you're looking for this interior guy. Looks like he carries the weight pretty well. I don't think he played at that size, quite that size, his junior year. So we'll have to see how that looks this year. But this is a guy that fits a role that you were looking for. And, it's great that they're able to get this commitment. We'll have to see how he looks this fall. He will be on a new team as he's transferred to Thompson High School in Alabama. But this is one that I'm really excited to watch this fall, just because, as we've emphasized, this sort of interior nose guard position was absolutely crucial to the type of defense that Bill Belichick ran in New England and likely will be for this North Carolina program as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think with him, he's a guy that, as you mentioned, put on the weight in the offseason. I think it's trying to transition to being someone that can play at that size, can be that two-gap player for Carolina. And I think that capability is there. With those number of tackles for loss, I think that's certainly something that he should be able to do. You're just hoping that those numbers sort of translate to the college level, because we've seen this before, Zach. You go back, guy like Malachi Hamrick, huge tackle for loss numbers, sack numbers, doesn't necessarily translate. Same thing with a guy like Curtis Simpson. Very similar numbers, doesn't really translate. Now, with Curtis Simpson, it was early in his career that he ends up transferring. So who knows? Maybe he does end up translating somewhere. But you always kind of take those numbers with a grain of salt. That's why I wanted to see a little bit more film on him. But there really isn't any film on him from his junior year. It's really all just his sophomore film that you have to go off of. So I'll be interested to see what he looks like as a senior. You mentioned it. He goes to a powerhouse school in the state of Alabama, Thompson High School, which, has produced state championships throughout the years. I think that they're going to be, a good chance that they're going to be one of the best teams again this year. And so this will give you a legitimate look at what exactly Carolina is getting. Because is he the guy that had the 99 total tackles with 22 tackles for loss, 12 and a half sacks, and 35 quarterback hurries? Or is he more in the realm of the guy that we saw his sophomore year when he was at Davis High School in Kaysville, Utah, where he had 39 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks? Those are numbers, by the way, that aren't bad. But you just have to know what exactly you're getting. Are you getting a guy, if you're coming in with those types of numbers and you are legitimately putting up the types of numbers that he put up this past year, this is a guy that's coming in here to challenge to play in his first year. If it's more of what we saw in his sophomore year, then maybe it takes a little bit of time. But, when I watched him, I thought, he has the, skill set, I think, to be able to take up the 2 gaps. I do think that's definitely a part of what he brings to the table. He does a good job of shedding blocks, does it pretty easily, uses the size and length well. Pretty nice level of physicality that's brought to the table. I mean, look, he's not over the top. He's not throwing guys aside, but he uses his physicality well enough to be able to get past guys. I think he has a very solid release off the line of scrimmage that puts him in an advantageous situation. You're always looking for guys that can get an advantage off the line of scrimmage, and I think for a defensive tackle, he's able to do that. So I definitely think this is a really solid all-around addition for Carolina. Do I think that this is a guy that necessarily is on the same level as Trashawn Ruffin? I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I mean, Ruffin, again, looks the part. All the intangibles are there for him. It's just about a matter of production, I think, for him. We'll hear him talk a little bit about that here coming up, as well as talk about his connection with Viliami and what that is like. So, I mean, look, Carolina with a nice pickup here. I think there are some rumors that they are still looking to potentially add another guy on the interior of the defensive line. They're looking to flip somebody that is committed to a top 2 or a power 2 conference. That was the phrasing that was used that someone told me. And so that would lead me to believe that if it's a power 2 conference, then it's someone probably out of the SEC. I'd be shocked if it's somebody from the Big Ten. I don't know if any Tar Heel targets actually at that position went to the Big Ten. So some of the speculatory names that are coming up, a lot of people pointing to Vodney Cleveland as somebody that Carolina could potentially be going after. Noah Clark, an in-state guy that Bill Belichick really likes. I know he has visited him a few times. Visited the school. Noah did not take an official visit to Carolina, but that could be another name to watch. And then another sneaky name that I think a lot of people have probably forgotten about, but keep this one on your radar, is Darian Albert, the guy out of the state of Mississippi who is high school teammates with Omari Johnson. So that is certainly somebody that I think could be on the table for Carolina as well. It'll be interesting to watch that over the next couple of months as we go throughout the season. Now let's get to the 2027 commit for Carolina. And Zach, they go in-state for this one. Skylar Robinson, they get him from the West Coast. But now they've got their second commitment, and it comes in-state. And this is a big one for Carolina to get wrapped up. Amir Brown, the 4-star running back out of Rollsville High School out there in Rollsville, North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh, the number 303 overall prospect and number 25 running back prospect in the 2027 class, according to 24/7 Sports composite rankings. Carolina lands him over Texas, Notre Dame, and a host of other big-time schools. This is a massive commitment for a guy that, as a sophomore, split carries in the backfield, but had 624 yards and 13 touchdowns and had 297 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. I expect those numbers to go way up this year, and this is a huge, huge addition for the Tar Heels in this class, even though he might only be 5'11", 205 pounds, electrifying player that Carolina got here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that size is any sort of detriment to him when you see how he plays. He is a speedy, shifty sort of, back in the day, what you'd call a change of pace type of back. A guy that you're going to see, make one cut and he's off to the races, or is going to make a lot of plays probably outside of the tackles, going up the sideline, which I think is something that every team needs. Depending on how you want to distribute those carries in terms of a running back rotation, you always need a guy like this that is, going to be a home run threat really whenever they have the football, and also potentially, and this is something that it's often difficult to see at the high school level, but at the college level, we see this a lot, is you have these type of guys that become really big receiving threats at running back. And so just based on his speed, that seems like something that would be very doable if he has the, temperament and the hands for it. And like I said, that's something that we'll have to see at the college level, but I can definitely see that just based on the overall profile and, what he brings from an ability to work within space. Really, really like that this is an in-state pickup. This is something that over multiple episodes of this show, we've mentioned not only as it relates to past classes, but this class. And when you look at the state of North Carolina and recruiting in the state overall, it's pretty abysmal right now for in-state programs. I mean, you look at the top 15 guys, only one of them, all of them are committed. Only one is committed to stay in state. That is number 15 in the state, Trashawn Ruffin. This is all per the 24/7 composite ranking for these guys. But, that is something that, as we've said multiple times, it is going to be important for North Carolina. Any era that they've been good, they have been good with players from the state of North Carolina, as well as some of these surrounding areas like Tennessee, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, places like that. But the home state has always been a big deal. And obviously college football is changing as a whole, not only with the transfer portal and NIL, but you just look at, this recruiting class and this roster that's being built under Bill Belichick and his staff. It's much more national than we've seen in the past. But, the feeling here has always been that the in-state guys are going to be a really important core backbone of what you want to build. And, I think this is a great first step in this 2027 class to potentially build that recruiting class a little bit differently, to have it be a little bit more in-state focused, or just not even focused, but just get more of those guys to really take the recruiting wins that they've had this summer and this spring, hopefully carry that into success in the fall and sort of show, this is what this program is. Maybe you felt that your interest in it has waned a little in the back half of the Mac Brown era. Well, this is a different era, and this is what we can do. This is what we can sell you in terms of, what you'll be doing on Saturdays, developing you for the NFL so you can play on the Sundays. That's really sort of my optimistic view, or what I'm looking for thus far. And I think that this is a really, really good first step to sort of building that into a reality.
Yeah, and it's only a guy that I think is going to get better. So that could be someone that attracts some of the other in-state guys. I mean, look, you've already got what seems like an inroad at one of the biggest schools in the entire state in Rollsville High School. They do have another guy in this class, Marquise Bryant, that I think Carolina is going to be very in on as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is the perfect first step, as you said. And I think they are going to show probably this cycle that they do mean a little more business in state. I think for some of these guys, I think there was a little skepticism. I will say that when you look at some of the guys that were in this past year's class, they're like a guy like Elijah Littlejohn, who comes out of West Charlotte High School. Not saying that he's a guy that isn't going to prevail at the next level, but a thinner player. When I watched him on film, wasn't necessarily blown away by what I saw from him. I think this year you're going to see things will be a little bit different. I think there's going to be more of a focus. I mean, we've already seen, some of the top guys in the state of North Carolina that have been on campus that Carolina is really focusing on. I know the, Cardinal Gibbons High School is a school that Carolina is trying to really get in with Xavier Hassan in this class, Skylar Alston in the 2028 class as well. But I mean, yeah, you already got Amir Brown, who is the number 9 player in the class that is committed to you. And then you've also got Marquise Bryan, who's 5th. And there's other guys that Carolina is in contact with and is pushing hard for already. So I think this year will definitely be more home state based, and it should be. We've talked about it. This state is as loaded with talent as just about any other state out there, unless you're in the states of California, Texas, Florida, maybe Georgia. Those are the states that we know for sure are producing more talent than Carolina is producing here in the home state. Outside of that, North Carolina is right there. They are producing some of the best talent. So now this has got to be one of the focuses of this staff, is to sort of push away some of those teams that have had a lot of success here. Notre Dame is a school that has done a really good job of invading this state over the last couple of years. And I think it's very similar when you talk about, teams like Tennessee, who has had success here as well. South Carolina, that's another one that I think, if you're Carolina, you probably want to find a way to sort of keep them from recruiting some of your top prospects in state. Clemson is the same way, but Clemson, at least that's an ACC team. That's a powerhouse in this area. Even to a certain extent, that's the same thing with South Carolina. You just want to avoid allowing teams like Georgia to come in here and pretty much pick who they want out of your state. Notre Dame, Oregon, coming in, getting Kendra Harrison. Those are what you're trying to avoid this time around. And the thing is that this staff didn't have those deep connections with a lot of these guys. And, for some of these, commitments that Carolina has in the 2026 class, you could say, well, how deep were those ties? But it doesn't really matter. Those guys seem to be more open to it. Maybe some of these guys in state just weren't as open to it. I like this pickup, just from, his standpoint as a player, really, really good running back. I think all the signs that you want to see. Really good straight line speed, about as good as anybody in this class. Nice acceleration and burst once he hits the hole that he wants to hit. Definitely, might be small, but runs with a nice edge and maintains a north-south mentality. That was one of the things that really stuck out to me, was that he is a guy that even with as much speed as he has, sometimes it is comfortable to say, okay, I'm a guy that has the speed. Let me try to win on the edges. Let me win in these C and D gaps. He's a guy that says, no, I can win in the A and B gaps as well, and I'm going to utilize that area of the field and allow myself to pick up yards there when they're there. Also, major threat out of the backfield as a receiver. I think he's only going to continue to grow there. I mean, the thing is, more than just a dump down threat, I think he does a really good job of freeing himself up on some of the downfield routes, so could be really dangerous in that area. And then there aren't a ton of reps of him in pass protection, but the few ones that there are show a pretty promising prospect in that area. Just the fact that he is showing the willingness and really holds up very well, especially for a guy of his size, I think is very, very encouraging. This is the way you begin a recruiting class. If you don't have your quarterback commit, which Carolina is still looking for in that 2027 class, go out, get a big name in state, start to get the ball rolling a little bit there. I think this is the perfect addition for Carolina. So that wraps up our look at the 3 commitments for Carolina. With the commitments that they have now, Carolina 18th in the 2026 class, 17th in the 2027 class at the times of these commitments. Again, we've talked about this multiple times, and this will be the last thing before I let you get out of here and we talk to Trashawn. When you look at, for Carolina, I mean, the volume, 35 commitments in this class, 18th overall. I think we've grown comfortable with the fact that Carolina's class is probably going to be just inside of the top 20. Maybe they sneak into that top 15 if they find a way to flip some big-time guys that, are committed to some of these SEC schools or something like that. But I think we've become very content with where this is at. And I think this is probably the area that you can expect that Bill Belichick is going to have his recruiting classes, because he is going to find some of those guys that are extremely talented, but he's also going to find those guys that fit exactly what he wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the focus right now for North Carolina should really be one of patience and one of being process oriented, of, accomplishing your goals one by one. I mean, a lot of folks, or I've seen some folks, not a lot, but some folks talking about, top 10 or top 5 classes just based on the fact that, this is a 6-time Super Bowl winner, which I do acknowledge, but that's a little early to be throwing those sort of expectations around just because you have a new coach. So you have to build these things over time. You have to get a top 20 class so you can get a top 15 class. You have to get these classes and build them and develop them so that you can compete for the ACC, maybe win the ACC, maybe make the playoff and compete, so on and so forth. So I think right now the focus has to be on, are you doing the things in year one to show that this is going to be different, that this is going to be a program that makes pretty big strides in terms of its development and deployment of players? Because we've seen classes in the past that have been top 10 or 15 that, some people may say, hey, those weren't developed to the level that we thought that they could be, and they weren't deployed to the level that they thought that they could be. So right now, that's the emphasis, at least for me, is, as long as you're in that 15 to 25 range, I think you're good. And then the next step this fall and then into next year will be, what does this team look like? What do you turn these guys into individually, and what do they become as a team? I think that's the point of emphasis, and that's really how we should grade what this staff and what this program is doing moving forward within the next 365 days.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. And I think that there is a good chance that if Carolina comes out, starts winning, there will be some momentum that will be gained, and you will start to see these recruiting classes get even better, especially that 2027 class. I think that's really the big one for him. We talked about 2026 and how important that was going to be, and we thought that was an area that his focus was going to be on the field. 2026 will be important for him because of how short his timeline is. But when it comes to recruiting, the effects will really be felt in 2027 if this staff is able to start winning. So we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully that does happen, but so far, so good, I think, for this staff in terms of just getting some guys on board and putting this recruiting class inside of the top 20, which is just about the area of talent that you want to be in when you're trying to, find those guys that match exactly the type of system that you want to play, match the physicality and everything like that, but also bringing in some talent. So, Zach, we'll let you go, buddy. Thanks so much for joining us here on this edition of the podcast. Appreciate it all, as always, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, man?
All right. Sounds good.
All right. All right, so there you go. Zack Hubbard hopping off there. I really appreciate Zack for stopping by with us tonight, giving us his thoughts. Great stuff, as always. And now it is time to turn to Trashawn Ruffin, the big man in the 2026 recruiting class for Carolina. Got a chance to sit down with him last Friday. Here's what he had to say talking to us. All right, now talking with Trashawn Ruffin. You know him as one of the top commitments in the Tar Heels 2026 class. Trashawn, how's it going, man? I know crazy day today. It became official that you got that offer. So how did that feel to get that official offer from Carolina?
First, I do want to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for being in this, in this predicament right here. But it felt great. Honestly, it felt great. All the hard work that I did. I committed back in March. And for them to send the official offer, plenty of colleges that did. It means a whole lot, and it shows how much work I put in this whole process.
Yeah. So earlier in the week, you did put up an announcement that you have 100, that you're locked down to Carolina and everything like that. So what did you feel like was the reason why you wanted to put that out there? Were there other schools that were contacting you and you just wanted to sort of clear all that up? Or did you, just want to show that, you are 100% committed, maybe for some of the other guys out there that could be wanting to commit to the class?
Yeah, it was a couple of colleges that were getting up with me whenever I was committed. Of course, that's normal for recruits and stuff. And I just want to lock it down. I'm home, man. Ain't no need. You know what I'm saying? I knew from day one I wasn't gonna go nowhere. I haven't taken a visit. A lot of these kids did commit. They went on official visits and stuff. But me, I went to one official visit. And that was where I was, and that's home. That's where I'm supposed to be.
So why is that? What is the reason, when you sat down and thought about it, you said to yourself, this is where I need to be. I need to be at Carolina.
The relationships, man. I created a fast relationship with them the first time. I was in school one day and Coach Thompson actually called me up and was like, "You trying to go to the UNC Duke game?" I'm like, "Man, I can't turn that down, man. I can't turn that down." So I ended up going to that. And then, that was the best ever visit I ever went on. Like the hospitality that they showed me and my family, me and my pops that whole weekend, it was the greatest, man. And it was unmatched from every single other college. And also I have the greatest head coach in the game, you know what I'm saying? Best defensive man, like his scheme. I know I fit well in his scheme.
Mm-hmm.
The D-line coach, Coach Diaco, that's one of my favorite staff members, and me and him, we'd chop it up every now and again. Coach Thompson texted me this morning. We was talking. It's just for me, it's like a whole relationship thing.
Yeah, I mean, and he has definitely seemed to be involved. Tell me a little bit about his involvement with you and everything like that, because he's a name that I don't think a lot of people really know what exactly he does. How involved has Coach Thompson been in the recruiting side of stuff?
He's been there since day one. Like literally, he's the one that started everything. He's the one that made me come down. Not made me, but he talked me into coming down there, and I feel like he made the biggest impact on me and my family. Every now and again, even when I was committed, he usually texted me like every other day, every time he can. Give me a call. I hope you're doing good. Hope your family. Tell your family I said hey, and that means a whole lot out of Coach Thompson.
So when you went on that official visit, or not your official visit, but when you went on the visit back in March to the game against Duke, you were there with LT. Man, that had to be something really special for him to come and swing by and be there. What did you learn from that conversation that you had with him? And what was that also part of the reason why you chose Carolina?
Honestly, we weren't really talking knowledge. Actually, we weren't talking football. We were just, man. He was. I'll be honest with you. It was tore out of the frame whenever I went, and me and was talking. He just couldn't believe that I was 17 years old. He kept saying it and saying it. Said again, what'd you say?
No, all good. I think, yeah. I mean, look, we say the same thing, man. We can't believe, the size and everything. That you're 17 years old, but it's amazing. And I think that's one of the cool things is that you do have him. You do have Julius Peppers that are former edge rushers at Carolina. When it comes to the defensive line, you talked a little bit about, fitting in Bill Belichick's system and everything like that. What type of fit is he talking about for you? Like what position exactly? We know it's nose guard, but is it one technique? Is it something like that? What's he talking to you about?
They told me I'm going to be from a 0 up to a 4 because of how versatile I am when it comes to my game. So I'm going to be playing literally everywhere on the line when I go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's what we want to hear. Going into your senior year now at North Duplin High School, what are you wanting to show this year that maybe you haven't been able to show up until this point?
Great leadership, being a good teammate and all, being more explosive, of course. Me, I'm really like a team person. I don't too much, I know what I can do on the field and I know what I'm capable of. For me, it's like I want to know, like, my teammate doing good. I want to congratulate them anytime they make a good play, and I want the same back, you know what I'm saying? So basically, I do want to better accolades from last year. Better. I just want more tackles from
Mhm.
last year. I slacked up a little bit. I ain't gonna lie. Well, I was getting doubled and triple. I'm working on fighting them a whole lot better. So that's the main things I do want to work on.
That's awesome. Hey, that's what we will love to hear. Hopefully, we'll be able to check out that senior tape and be able to point out some of those things with you with those double teams and everything like that. Now let's talk about the recruiter, Trashawn, because you are one of the best that we have had here in a long time, man. There's a lot of guys that come through that try to recruit with these classes, but you have done a tremendous job. What about the two guys today, especially Viliami on the interior of that defensive line as well? What were some of the conversations that you had with him, and what do you think about his game?
Yeah, so Viliami, actually me and my pops, we would go up to every official visit and we would talk to some of the guys, we'd stay the whole weekend there and just talk with most of the guys. And then he's one that stood out to me, man, because his size. And I found out he decommitted from Oregon at the time. I'm like, this dude decommitted from Oregon. He's coming to UNC. I said, that's a big jump right there. So we jumped right on him. Like we jumped right on him like instantly. And it's like, every now and again, I would text him like, man, come on home, man. You already know what home is and everything. He kept telling me like, yeah, I'm already knowing, man. We gonna make it happen. I'm like, all right, now I'm gonna hold you to your word now. So ended up today, he actually committed, and that made my day, honestly.
How about Carson Sneed as well? Another guy that, his brother's on the team now, Dayton. Have you been able to talk with Carson a little bit, or Dayton as well, with him being on the team right now?
Yep, Carson. So actually, when the first ever time I went to UNC, I went to a practice actually, and I saw him there. Coach Thompson introduced me to him, and me and him just been locked in ever since. So every now and again we'd chop it up, talk every now and again. And like yesterday, what was crazy? It was yesterday. Me and my friend was actually talking about him, and we were saying like how he is a big possibility he might come to UNC. Ended up 2 hours later, he called me on Instagram. And I was asleep at the time. And I texted him, like, I was asleep, my fault. What's up, dude? And ended up, I waking up in the morning. He was like, man, I'm home. He said, I'm going to call Lombardi tomorrow. I'm like, man, that just made my day right then. Like, man, he said he was going to make an announcement on the 5th. Ended up, he couldn't wait no longer and had to do it today.
Well, yeah, and it's a huge one for Carolina. Just I was honestly posting the article right before we got on here. So yeah, that's two huge commitments for Carolina. This class ranked inside of the top 20, everything like that. So when you look at this class so far, the other guy that I want to ask you about is the quarterback, man, Travis Burgess. How much pride do you take as a guy that's committed to this class when you see a guy like Travis Burgess sort of trending up in some of these ratings and really showing out like at the Elite 11?
Take a lot, man. And, Travis is a dog, man. I remember the first ever time I did talk to him, it was like one of my second visits when I came up there. And he was up there with him and all his family. And me and him were talking, and we were talking about how I was talking to him about how good UNC is, how good, the staff is, and how well they'll treat you, you know what I'm saying? And I kept being on him. And then actually I was at my brother's graduation thing, right? And I was on his Instagram live at the same time, and I actually witnessed him commit to UNC. Me and my pops got hyped inside the gym. We almost caused a scene in there.
Yeah, and he is amazing. He's definitely one of those guys that I think really has grown on a lot of these recruiting sites and everything like that. But I think probably should have been getting more hype when he was coming out, just because they were going off of the 1 year, but he is really trending up. That's really cool to see that. One thing that I wanted to ask you as well, how important is it for you to be involved with your pops? How important is it for you to bring him along on some of these visits and everything like that?
Everything, he tells me what I need to hear. When we on these visits, when I don't hear something, he'll hear it and he'll let me know, like, hey, these people said this, these people said that. He's the most important dude in my recruiting process, actually. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be, taking all these visits. He sacrificed his own job one time at one point so he could take me to visit, and that means a lot out of my pops. And, I love him, and I'll do anything to support. He'll do anything to support me.
That's amazing, man, especially for someone who has such a close connection with his dad as well. That's really, really cool. Last thing I want to ask you before we get you out of here, what is your ultimate goal at Carolina? Tell the people what your ultimate goal is for this program and for this university when you get there.
You know, I want to go there. I want to be a leader on and off the field. You know, I want to have everybody head straight. You know, even though I'm a freshman, you know, you can still go in as a freshman. And you know, I just want to go in there and be a dog, man. You know, in the classroom, out the classroom. You know, I want to report everywhere. You know, on time. I don't want to be late. You know, I want to be on top of every single thing whenever I get there.
All right. Love it, Trashawn. That's exactly what we want to hear, man. Hey, thanks so much for taking time with us today. Thanks so much for everything that you're doing recruiting-wise with the team and everything like that. And we're excited to see you out there starting out next year. All right, man?
Sir, thank you.
All right. Excuse me. So there is Trashawn Ruffin, the big defensive tackle commit for Carolina in the 2026 class. Great stuff from him. I thought that was really cool, especially the connection that he has with his dad. And the cool thing was his dad was in the background during that interview there. And so I think it worked out perfect. His dad got to hear his son just talk about how important it is to have him on these recruiting visits and everything like that, how cool of an experience it is to share these recruiting trips and everything like that with his father and this entire process. I think that was probably my favorite thing that I heard about out of this whole thing. I mean, there were a lot of really good things there from Trashawn. Very well-spoken young man. I think he's going to have a ton of success at Carolina, both in the classroom and on the field. But I really thought that was cool to see that connection between him and his dad. And as I mentioned, someone that has a really close connection with his dad as well. I do think that's really cool to see. So definitely a lot of great stuff there from Trashawn. We will post that interview separately so that you guys can go back and watch that. That'll be on the YouTube page. I know some of you guys are watching on YouTube right now. We greatly appreciate those that are doing that. Appreciate everybody else as well. But that is the area. If you missed the interview with Trashawn and you want to go back and check it out, you can, of course, go into the live video and watch it, but we will post it separately just so that you guys can go back and check that out. So great stuff there. Really appreciate Trashawn for dropping by with us there. So much fun. And we are going to continue to reach out to some of these recruits, especially once we get closer to the season and once we get in season for high school football to try to talk to these guys. Not going to be able to do as many scouting reports this year, if any. Not sure how many I'll actually be able to get to because I'm going to be doing some high school football stuff this year for WFNZ. So that's really cool. We're going to be rolling some of that stuff out for you guys, telling you more about that on the airwaves. So I don't want to spoil anything just yet. But with my involvement with that, that means that I won't be able to get out to as many high schools, get a look at some of these guys like I've done in years past. And so that's going to be the way that we supplement it. We're going to talk to some of the guys that are committed after they play some of their high school games and everything like that, just like we used to do back in the day after guys would play and I would go to the high school and see them. I'd do the stand-up interviews. This one, you'll get to see my face. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but we'll have those conversations throughout the year. One of the guys that I'm looking to get on right before the start of the season is Travis Burgess. So make sure that you guys are keeping tabs on everything that we're doing here because that one would be really cool if we can get him on. I know he's getting ready to play. I believe Grayson is going to play in the Corky Kell Classic, which is the big showcase event that Georgia has to kick off their high school football season. So would love to get him on to discuss that. And, of course, his commitment to Carolina, all the other stuff that's going on with him being a guy that's trending as well as anybody in the 2026 class, really in the entire country. I mean, a guy that's gone from outside of the top 400 to ranked inside of the top 65. So just a crazy, crazy jump for him. And definitely a guy that's worth monitoring here. We're monitoring the 2026 class for any other movement that Carolina has. Of course, CJ Sadler, still a guy that is expected to announce his commitment. That is a little over a week away now. They are expecting that to happen on Friday, August 15th. So if that happens, we will, of course, have you guys covered on that front. That would be the next time we would do a recruiting edition of the podcast, unless there is somebody else in the 2027 class that ends up popping. After that, it'd be about a week, and then there's a chance that we could have to do one on Andrew Rogers, an in-state guy that is committed to or is yet to be committed, a guy that was reclassified from the 2027 class to the 2026 class earlier this offseason. So now he's a guy that's in play for Carolina to potentially land. That would be a significant commitment as well for Carolina. So if that happens, we will, of course, have you covered on that front, on both the podcast side of things and the website side of things. Guys, make sure you head over to our website, HeelToughVlog.com. Get all of the latest stuff that you need going up tonight, right after we get done with this edition of the podcast. Once I get it posted and everything like that, then I will post the linebacker preview for the 2025 season tomorrow morning, hoping to have some takeaways from Bill Belichick's press conference earlier today. We know that you guys love to hear what get the biggest news and notes from whatever Bill Belichick says. I will go through, listen to his video that was posted from earlier today, and make sure that I give you any important news that you guys need to know from him talking. Might be able to do the coordinators, but might be a little bit of a time crunch. We'll have to see whether or not I'm able to get to that as well. So plenty of stuff going to be going up on the website for you guys here over the next couple of days, trying to round out those position previews and then, of course, get you ready for the upcoming season. You know, we love to do breakout players. We love to do bold predictions, that kind of stuff. So keep an eye out for all of that stuff coming up. And, of course, when it's game week, we will have you guys ready on that side of things. We, of course, are going to be locked in for the game against TCU. So make sure that you guys are keeping tabs on everything, HeelToughVlog.com. Meanwhile, on the basketball side of things, some major news coming down last night. Go over to the website, read about the latest on Luka Bogovac and whether or not he is coming to Carolina or not. We've got an update. We did a podcast last night that you guys can go back and check out as well in the same places that you're watching this podcast. Or if you're a listener to the podcast, just search the Four Corners podcast and it will pop up. That would be, something that you want to do as soon as possible, because that is a significant piece to Carolina's roster for the 25-26 season. So make sure that you guys go back and check all of that out. Once again, one of the other things that we're really pushing here on this, on these recent editions of the podcast, is to go over to the YouTube page. Give us a subscription over there. That would certainly be very helpful for us. We would greatly appreciate it. And that's also a great way to be able to watch any editions of the podcast. So that puts a bow on tonight's edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Want to thank Zack for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening to this edition. And as always, go Tar Heels.